All right, Erica, shall we do this?
Absolutely.
Excellent. Okay. Well, just a quick housekeeping point of conduct here. I have captions on in our slides, but should you need an alternate captioning tool, I'm going to put it in the chat right now. I used it earlier and it was quite good. So should you need that, there it is. All right, everyone. Here we go.
All right. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Erica Lewis. I am a tech lead at Canopy Studios. I'm a Gemini that likes long walks on the beach. Kidding. Trying to break the ice a little bit here. I have been in the at Canopy for 9 months, but I've been working in tech since 2002. I identify as a queer person of color, and I go by she, her pronouns or he, him pronouns in certain spaces. And I've been married to my lovely wife for 5 years. And I'm here because I would like to see more people that look like me in tech, and I'm willing to be an advocate for it.
Great, thanks, Erica. I'm Erin Linkins. I'm Canopy Studios Director of HR. My pronouns are she, her, or they, them. I've been with Canopy for about 4.5 years. I've been working with agencies in creative and tech spaces as a recruiter and an HR person since the late 90s, early 2000s. I'm a queer, sober person with a disability. And I am here because the last few years have illuminated a lot of things about my own blind spots, personally and professionally, and I'd love to pass on those learnings. So before we jump in, just wanted to say that Canopy is hiring for a number of positions. You can look at our careers page, canopy.com/careers. We are looking for Drupal developers, Drupal tech leads, PMs, and a lot of other positions as well. So feel free to take a look there sometime if you'd like to work with us. So in having conversations about diversity, equity, and inclusion, it's important to acknowledge a couple of things. Erica and I are going to talk about our very specific lived experiences, but we also want to recognize that when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, we're speaking about the intersection of a lot of things: age, race, gender nonconformity, sexual orientation, people with disabilities, neurodiversity. There are many, many nuanced groups of folks that I haven't mentioned. So if we don't name all of those folks specifically today or speak to their experiences specifically today, it's not because we're not thinking about them or considering them. Also, I just wanted to say we're not always going to do this right, but we are willing to be honest about our own privilege and our own experience as it was shaped by that privilege. We are open to difficult feedback and having hard conversations. We are definitely open to being wrong and apologizing for the things we say that are problematic or hurtful. And we are open to educating ourselves about all of those things and continuing to educate ourselves to do better.
So as we talk about diversity, inclusion, and equity, we would like for everybody to imagine a room with a table at the center. Some of you may have heard this metaphor before. The company's leadership is sitting at the table. Diversity is inviting people into the room. Inclusion is inviting folks to sit at the table. And equity is ensuring that everybody has an equal voice and are equally heard. So I wanted to talk a little bit about my perspective as a job seeker and what it feels like to look for a job and be me, essentially. So off the bat, any job that I'm applying for, the assumption that I go in with, and it has been, at least for the past 19 years, mostly right, I'm more than likely going to be not only a minority, but extreme minority at any job that I apply for. Unless I specifically seek out Black or POC-owned organizations, that is going to be the case. In my 19 years of working in tech, I have never worked with another Black woman, and I'm in the Washington, D.C. area. So it's a very diverse area. I think it speaks to how much of a minority I am in the industry. And when I'm interviewing for jobs, I'm not just interviewing as Erica, I'm interviewing as a Black queer woman. And that matters because, for one, I want to feel safe when I ask questions about diversity and inclusion without being met with defensiveness. And that happens a lot. People are caught off guard by those types of questions. And I am a person who will ask those questions in an interview with no qualms. I don't want to feel tokenized at any job that I go to. And this has happened quite a few times in the past where the joke has been that they don't need to have any more diversity hires because I check off all the boxes. And that is haha, not funny. And I also don't want those parts of me, being a Black queer woman, to be ignored at any place. The notion of quote unquote, I don't see color is harmful in a lot of different ways. And I also don't want to feel like as a Black queer woman at any workplace that advocates for diversity, that somehow that the hiring of diverse candidates somehow falls on me because I am a Black queer woman. And this is, I've literally had C-level people say those words to me. We are relying on you to help us with our diversity hires. That's not part of my job. I'm not getting paid for that. So that should never be an expectation.
All right, so I want to talk a little bit about a case study and just show you how shifting these things, diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives can really help a candidate base and an employee base. So just going to talk a little bit about where Canopy was as a company way back in 2019, so not that long ago, actually. This is a high-level overview of where we were. And we were, doing well, as you can see in some aspects of our population. But to step back from that a little bit, I've been a tech and creative recruiter and a person working in HR, like I said, since the late 90s. And a common undercurrent in hiring for tech companies throughout my career is that the world of tech is centered on young white men. There are no people of color in tech. Now, from the perspective of my own privilege as a white person, it was very easy to accept that narrative, and it made it really easy to not have to work hard to change that narrative. And it's painful for me to say that out loud today, but it's the truth. And I could look at where we were in 2019 and say, hey, look at us, we're majority female, that's great. We have great age diversity, that's awesome. But even with that makeup, we were historically very white as a company. And we also weren't having a lot of open conversations about changing that. So we kept the fact that we were female-owned, run, led, and comprised front and center. And we did some things to try and work on diversity in our walls. Excuse me. We aligned ourselves with job postings with HBCUs a few years ago. And of course, we were always happy to see diverse candidates moving through the pipeline. But if I'm being really honest, we did not make serious efforts toward recruiting a diverse candidate base or making our hiring practices or even the company just foundationally more inclusive. And where our transformation really started to happen was in earnest at the end of 2019, beginning of 2020. It first started with COVID, but then it really ramped up almost simultaneously in the immediate reckoning after the murders of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd. Now, I hate to use the term unprecedented times. We've all heard that a million times in the last year and a half, but that's what we found ourselves in. Internally and externally, we saw candidates, employees who were exhausted, emotionally exhausted, spiritually exhausted, just exhausted humans. And, as a company, our leadership team decided we wanted to write a Black Lives Matter post on our company's blog. But, in reviewing that, a draft of it prior to posting it, it was just very clear to us that people were struggling and our words were just not enough anymore. So we had to take a good, hard look in the mirror and ask ourselves, how do we put our money where our mouths are, where this where this is concerned? How do we have hard conversations surrounding safety, inclusion, intersectionality inside the company first and foremost? And then how do we extend those things to our hiring practices? And beyond just hiring, how do we create a foundation that makes our company feel safe for people to apply, to accept offers, to be an employee and to stay for the long term? So we did a number of things, and I'll get to those things momentarily, but on a high level, for the first item, we talked about ways we could align ourselves with groups that elevate marginalized voices in tech. For the second item, we started to educate our leadership, our managers, and of course our employees to ensure we were prepared to make that safe space, to have tough conversations about our current and future state. And for the third, we really created some internal initiatives to address systemic oppression and hold a welcoming space that was set up to bring in diverse talent in an inclusive way. So, sorry about that. Yep, okay, I'm good. So in terms of hiring, toward the end of 2019, we changed the language about diversity, equity, and inclusion on our job postings and on our website. So what you're seeing here is a diversity alignment statement, and we put that on applications for every position at Canopy Studios. And what this says is, we are a company that seeks out a diverse, inclusive client base dedicated to making the world a better place. Some clients do this via their mission, and some do this through allyship, service to, and connection with marginalized and disenfranchised communities. We are looking for candidates who share our passion for our clients and who are dedicated to the communities they serve. Does this sound like you? So when folks are applying for jobs, they click and agree with this to move through, or they click no, and they are disqualified. And we believe that if you're not enthusiastically in alignment with this mission, then it's probably not the right fit for you as a company.
And I would just like to add that statement on the job application when I was filling out to work at Canopy is what made me feel excited about the job, that I would be working with people who are like-minded and are there to try and uplift marginalized folks in the realm of tech. Also, what feels good in an interview? I think it's really important to speak about that. And I can say from my perspective, being able to ask questions about inclusivity and diversity in an interview and not feel like you just dropped a bomb in the room. And that has happened to me numerous times where you can tell that the interviewers are scrambling to figure out how do we answer this question. And I think every job, every tech company, I think every company should be prepared for that question. And I encourage people to ask that question regardless of their background. Seeing companies directly address their failings, learnings, and next steps. I can say when I interviewed for Canopy and I asked the quote unquote bomb question and nobody panicked, and I was given a very clear and concise answer to the question. And it's, I'm not saying that this is the answer that fulfills everything, but their answer was, we're not there yet, but we're working on it. And to me, that the honesty of that answer really compelled me and made me feel more comfortable about this interview process. And I think it's incredibly important. I've been on a lot of tech interviews. And again, it very, very rarely, I can't say never, but very, very rarely am I not the only person of color in the interview. So your interview process should also reflect the diversity of your organization. So that means including women on the interview process. That includes inviting POC people to the interview process. And, you know, we talk about all these things, but I want to make it very clear, no organization is perfect. We don't think that any organization is perfect. I don't think any organization will be perfect. We'll be working on these for the next 50, 60, 70 years, right? But what makes it better is transparency and a willingness to try. Those things are really important for minority candidates interviewing for positions.
All right, so just to talk a little bit about some specific inclusive hiring best practices. Posting in spaces where diverse candidates search for jobs. As I mentioned, we at first primarily posted on job boards aligned with HBCUs, and although those are fine places to start, we also need to remember that not everyone we are targeting will have the same access to college or to technology. We also focus on social spaces like Black Tech Twitter, Latinx Tech Twitter. We align ourselves with organizations like People of Color in Tech and Black Girls Code, who work to elevate underrepresented and underestimated folks. We work to make candidates feel seen by introducing our pronouns and offering accessibility options like captioning in our Zoom interviews and accommodations or alternatives to our skills assessments. We make asking hard questions safe by, as Erica mentioned, being ready to answer honestly and intentionally. And finally, we're not always great at it, but one of our core values at Canopy is own it, and we are willing to be wrong. We are willing to apologize for harms when we need to do that. And we are willing to do the education and the work ourselves to do it better next time.
And anecdotally, I keep talking about my first interview with Canopy, but it was very impactful. The first thing they asked me were my pronouns, and that was huge. I'd never been asked that on an interview before. And when they introduced their own pronouns, it just made me feel more comfortable. Being a queer person in the workplace, there are a lot of different things that you experience that if you're not queer, you don't experience. And, you know, the fact that they asked that let me know that they were very accepting of queer culture and queer people. And it meant I didn't have to have an awkward conversation about, oh, well, I'm queer, I'm married to a woman. None of that had to happen. And instantly I felt myself relax and get more comfortable in the interview. I was able to let my personality come out a little bit more in the interview. And I'd like to think that got me the job. And I think that's really important. We want to, during the interview process, you want to see people for who they are and not some facade that they're putting on because they think they have to do that to get the job.
Okay. So in addition to hiring practices, I just want to highlight some foundational efforts we've made in the past year in working toward building a more inclusive culture overall. So first, we've worked to align our company with inclusivity. So we've taken some time to look at our clients and end a few relationships with clients whose values don't align with where we are today. We openly discuss diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. So we've increased our transparency with applicants and employees regarding our current and desired future state with respect to DEI initiatives. We hold space when times are difficult. So particularly in light of racial attacks on Asian and Black communities and ongoing dialogue regarding COVID, we openly hold space for employees to not be okay. And we do this in a number of ways. Most notably, we created a channel in Slack called Being Human. And that channel is a place that's opt-in where folks can come and vent if they're not okay and get support from their colleagues. Canopy is a fully remote company, always has been, but in remote times, it's nice to have those sort of social spaces within the company where folks can just not be okay. Additionally, we hold a 3 times weekly meditation practice to just center and practice mindfulness. We create intentional, inclusive internal mechanisms. So we support our staff who need accommodations. Captioning is turned on for all of our meetings. We offer accommodations for remote workspaces when and where they're needed. We align our benefits with diversity, equity, and inclusion practices. So just as one example, we made Juneteenth an optional day of service holiday. We have employees in the United States and Canada, so this is company-wide, even if in Canada it's not a recognized holiday. And We support organizations focused on elevating underestimated voices. So we make monthly donations to both the Equal Justice Initiative and Black Girls Code. We create internal guideposts for inclusivity. So there are a few things we've done on that end. We wrote an overview of best practices regarding inclusive language, which we use to onboard not only employees, but contractors as well. And we use as a guidepost for staff. And this inclusive language guidepost basically includes problematic language, things like digital blackface in GIFs, so how to avoid doing those things, ways we tell jokes, terms to avoid that have racist roots, and suggestions for alternative language. So if you're not aware that something you're saying is problematic, we can point you there and you can see some alternatives and then make reparations from there. Additionally, we've continued to work on being a call-in culture, remaining teachable. So we make sure to reach out and discuss problematic language and behavior in real time. We hold space for folks to apologize and educate themselves. We hold staff trainings on bias and inclusion. We formed a diversity, equity, and inclusion initiative and made it open for folks to opt in. We perform regular salary audits to ensure pay equity among our staff, particularly our female staff and our folks of color. And personally, within the HR practice, I maintain a quarterly inclusion initiative report card, and that just kind of keeps me accountable. It measures strides in all of these things that I've just mentioned. And it really helps to just sort of facilitate a conversation with the leadership team to ensure that we're all on the same page. And so, yeah, these are the things we've done since January of 2020. It's a lot of stuff, but it was a lift that was very, very worth it. So you may be wondering, how did all of this change things? I want to give you an apples to apples comparison between 2019 with the former statistics and 2021 as of today. Now, before I tell you about these statistics, I do want to say that I'm falling short in a couple of the less visible areas of diversity that we've worked to align ourselves with. So neurodiversity, folks within the LGBTQIA community, people with disabilities, things of that nature. So just know that with respect to aligning ourselves to these statistics, we're doing some high-level research just to educate ourselves in safe ways to poll the staff so that they feel respected and they feel like it's safe to report those things about themselves for our statistical purposes. And so I will say when I show you the statistics next that they won't have these numbers, but if we do this presentation again in future, I'll update them when I do have those numbers. So where are we today? We have 53 employees. So between those last stats in 2019 and today, we've reduced by 4 employees and grown by 18. Folks who identify as female or gender nonconforming grew by 8, holding at 57% of the total employee base. Our total percentage of employees of color increased by 10% to 20% overall. We hired a number of employees over the age of 40, holding at 50% of our total employee base. Of that 50%, 21% of those are over the age of 50. The percentage of folks in leadership roles who identify as female or gender nonconforming also grew by 10%. And that group includes our CEO, Ann Stefanik, who I believe is here, our CTO, our COO. We did a poll of employee happiness. We have 95% employee happiness and a 93% retention rate, which is excellent in our industry. Typical retention for agencies is 67%. So overall, we've done a lot of work to have a very strong, very intentional culture, and that's really shown in our growth overall as a group.
So as an employee of Canopy, how have these changes affected me personally, and more than likely some of the other minority employees? So I can say personally, I do feel very seen and heard at Canopy. Not only do I feel comfortable with my coworkers, but also my coworkers feel comfortable approaching me about sensitive questions, which means a lot to me. And not everybody, that's not everybody's gospel, as my mother would say. But it is definitely mine. And I did have an employee, one of my coworkers, come to me and ask about the reactions on Slack posts. So we've all seen the skin tone reactions. And I don't know if anybody else has been asked this question or asked this question to themselves. So when I react to a post, it's a black thumbs up or a black raised hands or whatever I'm feeling. And so their question was, can I piggyback on your emoji or should I add my own? And it may seem like something so small and insignificant, and why even ask that question, but it's a big deal. And for some people they may not like that a white person would be piggybacking on their emoji. And for me personally, I did not care, but it meant a lot that they felt comfortable asking me that. And I said we'd be on the safe side. Even though I don't care, other people might care. So maybe add your own emoji. And then Slack was spying on us and they updated, and now you don't have to worry about it anymore. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's like the rainbow of skin-toned emojis appears now instead of it just being the singular ones. I feel very comfortable expressing my desire to see more people like me in the workplace. I've talked about it with our CEO. I've talked about it with my direct managers. I've talked about it with Aaron, and how we can accomplish that. I'm very eager to see Canopy grow in the diversity area, growing by doubling their people of color that work there is fantastic. Let's see if next year we can even double that. And then if I do have any issues with a coworker or somebody who's a direct report, I can feel confident that I can go to HR and lay out what happened and not have to explain why what happened may be offensive to me or may have hurt my feelings or may have made me feel weird. HR has educated themselves in a way that allows me to lay it at their feet and not have to be re-traumatized by explaining everything all over again. And that has happened to me countless times at jobs where you have to say, well, they said a particular word that I felt was inappropriate. Well, why is it inappropriate? And so then now you're having to explain everything to them. I don't feel like I have to do that at Canopy. I know that HR is a fantastic source of help if I need to communicate with my coworkers better. And then I know because of Canopy's hiring practices, the people that are surrounding me, they're the kind of people who want to learn, are ready to be called in, and it doesn't become an awkward situation, so to speak. And what I love the most about Canopy and all of their diversity initiatives is that I know that more change is coming. I'm watching the change happen in real time. This wasn't just lip service during my interview that they were working on it. These are things that are actually happening. And that makes me feel not only very comfortable and happy at my job, but it makes me feel very proud to work at Canopy. And I am always trying to get my tech friends to come on board here at Canopy as a result.
All right, so as we wrap up, I just want to thank some of the resources that we've used to do our research and our learnings along the way. This is a very small but very mighty list of podcasts, presentations, and books, and I'm grateful that these folks did a lot of labor to help us in this journey. So specifically, I'd like to acknowledge Aiko Bethea, Brene Brown, Ibram X. Kendi, Janet Stovall, and Ngioma Oluo. And in closing, I feel like we have come a long way, but there is a lot more work to be done. The biggest thing I can leave you with is to remember that you will not always get it right, and it's okay to get it wrong. Just stay open, teachable, and willing to do better during this process.
So you all have heard us talk for the last 30 minutes, about 30 minutes, and both Aaron and I want to thank you so much for coming to our session, for listening, for being willing to listen to these things. And we really hope that this has been very informational, and that you'll be able to take some of these things back to your organizations and apply them and grow your diversity at your jobs. We are also very happy to discuss anything that we've mentioned during this session with you one-on-one via email, or we may be, even if you wanted to schedule a Zoom with us and talk about some of this, we would absolutely be more than happy to do that. Our email addresses are there, so just feel free to drop something there. And we'll try and answer maybe one or two questions if folks have them before we leave. We'll see what the powers that be say about us doing that. All right.
All right. So it looks like one of the questions that I saw was, how does a company get the budget together? Like, what does the cost look like really in terms of, doing these initiatives? And I really think the biggest cost, at least for us, you can do an analysis on the people's time to put together some of these measures, like a report card and things of that nature. But the real cost is aligning yourself with very specific job boards and things of that nature. So for a person who's already doing recruiting, this is not a heavy lift. It's just getting the budget to do it, to be quite honest with you. And, I think honestly, it's additionally a willingness as a leadership team to talk about these things very directly and very honestly. So like Erica said, please take a screen grab of our email addresses. Really, they're just our first names, Erin@canopy.com, KANOPI.com, or Erica, and that's spelled with a K, ERIKA @canopy.com. And we would be happy to set up time to talk to folks if anyone has any questions. So let's see. One of the questions that I saw as well that I wanted to just point out real quick is, do you have any suggestions on tactfully approaching a discussion with leadership about an observed lack of diversity within your organization? Erica actually has done this. So Erica, you want to take that and go with it a bit?
Yeah. Sometimes, admittedly, tactfulness is not my strong suit, but just know going into this, it's going to be an uncomfortable conversation. So there's no way to really approach this and avoid that awkwardness and avoid that discomfort. And I think it's important to point out the benefits of having more diversity in the workplace. I think we should want to do it just to do it, but I think the higher ups always want to hear about a bottom line. So coming to the conversation with this increases productivity, this increases creativity, this increases a great camaraderie in your workplace. Coming to the table with those kinds of stats, I think, is really, really helpful. But again, just to say one more time, it is going to be uncomfortable. There's no way to really avoid that. But Erin, if you have anything to kind of piggyback on that.
Sure. So, I think the more you have the conversations, the less uncomfortable the conversations become. And that's the thing that I've really learned from doing this with dedication. So it's really, first, just start at the very top. If you're in a leadership role and someone's brought this to you, bring it to the leadership and say, listen, I need to talk about something that's really sensitive, but it's really important. And, we don't need to ask the employee to educate us why it's important. We need to do the education ourselves. So I think also stressing to the leadership team that we don't need our employees to explain to us why we need to do better. If they're saying we need to do better, we need to take that seriously and think about what we can do as an organization to change that. And I think just being willing to say, I'm not sure how to answer this right now, but let me talk to some folks and let me get back to you. And then follow through on that promise, of course. I think, again, uncomfortable conversations are uncomfortable. It's our willingness to have them that is the important part too. So let's see. I think another one that I saw, and then we'll wrap up, is what are your top recommendations for increasing the efficacy of recruitment and hiring practices for diversity, equity, and inclusion? So many recruiters will throw a net into the ocean and pull up, whatever comes with that net. So that means posting on LinkedIn, on free job boards. Maybe it's with your candidate management system. You have free job boards and you post them there. So you're going to get a lot of different candidates. If you're not targeting those postings specific to the industries you're looking to increase in visibility in, then you're not going to receive those candidates. So in other words, if you're posting to job boards, People of Color in Tech has a great job board. So as one example, there are many. You can use Google search, whatever Latinx folks in tech, LGBTQIA folks in tech, and then they all have job boards you can post there. Your candidates will incrementally increase with those postings. So that's, it's basically just go where the people are that you want to target, essentially. So I think and be willing to pay for it too, because they do cost money, but typically it's a 30 or 60-day fee, and it's minimal compared to, continuing to have an employee base that maybe isn't aligned with your values over the long term. Let's see. So, okay, I'll answer one more question. I love this question. Really liked your examples of how to hold space. Can you expand on that a little bit more? Specifically ways we can do this asynchronously for team members in time zones that are very far apart. I'm not sure what time zones that are very far apart look like, but for us, we are all over the US and Canada. So all time zones are represented, all provinces. And I think we've got 17 states or something. We have a lot of folks in different places. So really it's not only creating spaces like, a Slack channel and those folks who kind of are grouped together in terms of time zones, or if you've got people across the world, maybe there are groups of folks across the world that can support each other. But additionally, I think it's just having your leaders in those spaces, being aware that there's exhaustion, that there's difficulty, that, just being open to people being off camera, as an example, if they're not feeling okay. Being open to people being able to take a mental health day to be able to just rest and relax. People being okay to just voice that they're not okay in general really goes a long way. I mean, Erica, do you have any additional thoughts on that?
I just want to piggyback on having leadership be a part of that. I think that is incredibly important. And it may be harder at some organizations than others, but the fact that I can post in our Being Human channel that I'm having a rough day and my work productivity has suffered as a result of it. And I'm miserable that day. And to have our CEO respond and say, I'm so sorry that that's happening for you. And if there's anything I can do, let me know. It really makes you feel like you can express practically anything and get support from everyone, not just your coworkers, but from leadership. It just takes on a completely different meaning at that point.
Right. I would agree with that. And it looks like we have one other question, so I don't want to leave that question hanging. And that is, what are common pitfalls when hiring for diversity? Great question. So I think it's what Erica alluded to earlier with the whole need to check boxes. I mean, we don't need to check boxes. What we need to do is get a great group of differing voices into our walls, right? So like I said, if we're posting jobs where those people are, if we are finding the right, the right spaces to put our job postings, and we're getting a very large group of candidates coming in that are coming from those spaces and those targeted groups, then we're inevitably going to find the most talented individuals to hire. It's not going to be about, I need, to increase my percentage by 10%. I think when you start to make really specific metrics, you're not hiring for the people, you're hiring for numbers. And that's, the difference between diversity and inclusion, really, and equity. We want to have the talented voices that bring differing perspectives to the table. And we want them to join in a company where they feel like their talents are going to be appreciated and celebrated along with everyone else's. So, I think that is everything. And I can certainly send a PDF of the presentation to anyone who would like it if you want. And again, please don't hesitate to reach out to Erica or myself. We would be happy to jump on a Zoom call or email or chat, whatever you'd like to do in order to help you build some of these initiatives for yourselves. I think that by sharing our experience and not keeping it hoarded in the walls of a company, we're going to make it better for everyone and make it safer for everyone. So I think that that's really our purpose here today. So I think that's everything. Erica, did you have any closing words you wanted to say?
No, just again, thank you for everyone. And, this is both Erin and I's first time presenting at DrupalCon. So thank you so much, DrupalCon. I am sure you saw on my my picture that I'm actually a WordPress tech lead, but y'all have been so welcoming. And I am so excited to look at some more of the presentations here at DrupalCon. And who knows, maybe I'll dip my fingers in a little bit of Drupal and become one of you.
Yeah, and thank you so much for the opportunity to share our experience here. We're really, really grateful that this is helpful to folks, that this was an accepted session. Thank you to Canopy for creating a space and allowing us to be able to speak our truth very, very openly. That has been a real gift in a professional space. So thank you again, everybody. Have a great one and take care.
Yeah, good question.
Unless anyone else has questions, I don't know. We can sit here.